podcast, blog. What are we doing here, Roy? Roy Gatling is joining me today. We are super excited to join you semi-live. I think this will actually go to the video, but we're live technically on Google Hangouts right now. I don't know if anybody will end up joining us live or not. We didn't publicly put that out there, but super excited to have Roy Gatling back with us today to talk about the ripple effect of engaged leadership. Roy, why don't we get started by just giving another real quick rundown for those of people that are seeing this for the first time that didn't see our last video. Give them a little bit of a rundown about what you've done with your career and sort of, what you're up to these days.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. Well, I was as some people know, I was a longtime Dell guy. I spent a lot of years at Dell. In fact, I was one of the early folks to join the company. There was a group of us actually known as the Pioneers there, and we even have a nifty gold pin that shows Pioneer on it. Anyway, I got to do a lot of things at Dell, and even prior to Dell, I was involved in the technology business. But Dell, I started out in support, talking to customers, trying to help them with their problems, which is really a great place to start because it was direct engagement with the customer, and it made an impression on, well, not only me but the other people that worked there with how critical that was.
Yep.
But from there, moved into the development world, did a lot of things, program management, ran test labs. I worked in the services group, and in the last few years there, I was involved in mergers and acquisitions and got into that via the product development side, and then ultimately moved into the integration at really the core level, kind of running the project team for that. So a lot of wonderful experiences there, and fortunate.
That's great. And so, you recently left Dell, and you're kind of still doing some of the same kind of work. Maybe share with us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Sure. I'm again fortunate to be able to connect with some people out of Dallas. There's a boutique consulting firm in Dallas known as M&A Partners, and they focus strictly on mergers and acquisitions. Integration is really their strength, and but due diligence is certainly something that they know. And what they bring is not only core competence with that, people that know this, but also a very well thought out process. And the people there are phenomenal. I mean, they've got experience that blows mine away. And so I've been really, really fortunate to not only get to meet them, but work with them. In fact, we've been working on a deal in San Antonio for a while, which has been interesting. A different sector, not high tech. And but in any event, working there and learning more and seeing how they do things relative to the way Dell did things, which actually are pretty close.
Really, that's great. Mm-hmm. So, we wanted to talk today about the ripple effect of engaged leadership, and more specifically, engaged leaders and what they bring to the table. And obviously, throughout your career with Dell, you've gotten to experience all different types of leadership, in that period of time, and through mergers and acquisitions, obviously identified different companies that were interesting to potentially pursue from an acquisition perspective for Dell, and of course in the work that you're doing today. Tell me what you think an engaged leader is and what that means.
Sure. I think I'm going to start with the second half of the question first, and try to get to maybe a little bit of a definition of engagement. And so when I think about that word, I'm thinking about someone who maybe is emotionally invested or emotionally committed, but they are all in with regard to the mission or the movement, what have you. Engaged leaders are those that have definitely connected with whatever that mission is, and they have made a conscious decision to invest and commit to that. I think it touches something inside. It's got to be an intrinsic thing, I think, in order to become an engaged leader. So I'd say that's my definition.
So you've gotten a lot of experience. You've seen a lot of different companies do a lot of things. Do you have some examples aside from Dell of companies that really impress you by having engaged leadership at the top? And maybe some examples of companies that maybe kind of stand as an example of maybe not quite having that engaged leadership.
Sure. The most recent example is the company that we're doing work for in San Antonio, a fairly large company in the oil and gas sector. And the thing that struck me really within the first couple of days was the manner in which these high-level folks engaged us. Now, here we come in as consultants, and a lot of times consultants, they're either held in high regard and treated very well, or they're viewed as, just, hey, give me the info and stay out of my way. And
The Bobs from Office Space.
There you go. And the one thing I saw, and we were dealing with people that are very senior, I mean, report to the CEO or the COO, those types. And they were very collaborative, and they wanted to have the engagement with us one-on-one, one-to-many, but basically face-to-face that we were going to talk. And when you're in the middle of doing a deal, it's hair on fire time. I mean, It is crazy busy, and yet these people we were dealing with made it a point to come into the office that four of us were jammed into, and spend time with us, keep us up to date on what was going on, get our input on ways that we thought things should be done. I mean, we were certainly feeding them documentation that we were developing, and we were off meeting with a number of groups. But the thing I saw was how they engaged us, and I mean, not only the collaborative attitude, but they were just incredibly polite and professional. It was really nice. And the one thing I found out was that the CEO there tends to be kind of a quiet guy. And I was a little bit intrigued by this, but I found out that he does not like overly aggressive personalities. He's not one that tolerates people pounding on desks and yelling at each other and all that. So he, I think all of this, when they say it comes from the top, I absolutely believe it, because I've seen it too many times, good and bad, where the person at the top really determines how people treat one another, the culture of the company, etc. So this is a case where this person, this CEO, really made it clear to everyone, we're going to treat each other well. No matter who you are, we're going to treat you well, the way we want to be treated. We're going to expect a lot out of you. But in any event, that was good. Another one, a company that we bought out in...
Let me ask you a question before
Sure.
you move on to the other one. Is that one of the reasons that made that company a potential target for acquisition? Because of that leadership style, because of the potentially the exposure that got outside that company, made it a good potential play for another organization?
Well, actually, they're the buyer in this case.
Okay.
But I think that his approach is going to appeal to the seller's CEO, and this happens to be a bid situation. Basically, there are a number of potential buyers involved, and I think that clearly, money talks. But knowing how, again, if the cultures align, because at the end of the day, it's also a people business.
Sure.
You've got people that are coming along with this, and so if that seems to be a better match, the likelihood of that deal coming together is higher, I think.
That's great. Well, and you were about to touch on companies that maybe an example or two of companies that don't quite have that understanding of engagement from a leadership perspective, and how that's worked against them.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to name names, but one thing I've seen another company came from the top is basically a method of working where people seem to be pitted against each other. Yep. It was almost like you're in Gladiator, and two got thrown into the arena, and whoever lives, well, yay, you get to fight another day. And it's not, well, you're worm food. So that was the way that the person at the top seemed to operate, and I saw that flow down to the rest of the organization. People, the way that people tended to look good or try to make themselves look good was by making someone else look bad.
Yep.
And so a pretty negative environment at times. Clearly, there were pockets of folks that didn't act that way because they just didn't buy into it. But you saw a lot of people that did, and it was kind of the person who could scream the loudest was the one that won a lot of times, which I think is just a crummy way to work.
Yep,
But
absolutely. You and I've talked about it a lot of times. Good leadership has a positive ripple effect, and bad leadership also has a ripple effect. And
true.
Unfortunately, when you have a bad, disengaged leader at the top, they tend to let their direct reports or their management team sort of run roughshod over their people, and it really, really undermines the mission of the company. And and it's unfortunate because there's so much more potential from an organization if everybody's kind of clicking and working together, and you don't have this kind of territorialism or someone trying to assert themselves by being the loudest person in the room, like you said. There's just I think especially in today's world, especially with so many career options, I think a lot of people get tired of those kinds of environments and say, hey, I'm done. I'm going to go elsewhere, to a place that I can feel heard and understood, and I can feel like I've got a place at the table, and that my opinion matters. And the dictatorial kind of approach, I think, tends to end up costing companies a lot of core talent.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially these days. You mentioned it. There's a lot of options on the table for people, and I think the culture that comes again from the top has a lot to do with it. Is it a command and control structure, or do they lean a little more toward autonomy or allowing people a little bit of freedom, to go off and do things? So.
Yeah, well, that's great insight. I mean, I was excited about about talking to about this topic with you, because you are the man when it comes to understanding those types of environments and seeing it from both the good and the bad from your various experiences. Obviously, with especially at the end of your career with Dell, with seeing acquisitions and sort of both positive and negative environments. Obviously, if I'm a CEO or I'm a business unit leader, how do I know if I'm an engaged leader in your opinion?
Well, I think there's probably a few ways, but I think one way is look at that person's people. I mean, how motivated, how engaged they seem to be. That's one thing. I think you can. I think you could go anywhere from body language to tonality to looking at their calendar. Are they at? Because I think if you're engaged, you are connecting with not only your team but your peers, those that are in other parts of the company. I mean, you are doing your best not only to focus on your business but the business as a whole and what's going on with these other teams to not only further what you're doing but also see how you can help them to further what they're doing. But I think that whole connection piece is a big part of it. I got to meet Brian Gladden, who was the CFO at Dell up until, I don't know, 7 months ago. And he had been the CEO at GE Plastics. And I actually interviewed him for a podcast a couple of months after he came to Dell. And I asked him, how do you really know that your people, your leaders, are really out there, and I didn't use the word engaged, but in essence that's what I was trying to get at. And one of the little things he mentioned was looking at their calendar. Who are they meeting with? How often are they meeting with their people? Right? But that's just one part of it. There's the whole communication piece. Right? But if you're not engaged with them, if you're not connecting with them and communicating with them, then it's hard to be engaged. So I think you'll see it. There'll be evidence of it in the team. There'll be evidence of it with the individual, and I think you can look at a few things that really point out that they're not. So there's a few ways.
Those are great points. One of the things that I think I might assert there is if you're a leader and you're sitting there watching this and you've got a question, am I an engaged leader? I think one question that you might ask yourself is how often are you meeting with people at the various lowest rungs of the company? Sure. You actually made this point when you found out I was doing training for a company recently that one of the best bits of advice for up and comers within the the organization was to have meetings with their boss's boss and understand their challenges and what they do, who do they turn to in times of crisis or times of struggle, or when they need that bit of motivation and inspiration, or maybe that innovation for a new idea. And that I shared that point with that audience, and they really, really appreciated that because it was so key. But I also think it's kind of in reverse, because that the onus is on the employee to make those connections and to do that. But I think if you're an engaged leader, you're seeking those out and looking for those opportunities on an ongoing, consistent basis. And it's not right about the time that you do the the 360 evaluations. It's got to be a continual, ongoing process. I have a good friend, Kay Stroman, who I'll interview at some point on one of these Google Hangouts. She was an HR director of HR, vice president of HR for a major communications company when I first met her, and she was responsible for everything related to HR, but also the learning development of the staff and being that core leader. And her team, she said, your job is to get out from behind the desk, go walk the floor, go talk to people, find out what's happening in their world, because the work is always going to be there. The work, the business, that never stops. But right. People stop their lives in order to come do the business. And so, the reality is you've got to find a way to connect with those people. And that really stood out as a good example of, someone that got it, right? And she's an engaged leader and was setting by example the tone by which she wanted her team to perform as well. And I guess that kind of brings me to my last point is, when you look at from a leadership perspective, if you're only listening to the people that are in your immediate management team, and that's your only point of reference, you're missing a lot of key opportunities. I think you've probably seen that. Maybe you have a story or something that you might want to share with us relative to that.
Well, yeah, you do have to be careful about inhaling your own exhaust because I think you become blinded by some of that. And the other thing, in that type of environment is that you got to be a little bit concerned about is people, just wanting to, either appease or, just make somebody happy, right? I'm going to be your yes man or woman or what have you. And so do they have the fortitude and, the courage and the wherewithal to say no or to question some things when it seems appropriate? So if you're, I think you really got to be careful in some of those situations. And I agree with you. The whole, management by walking around, man, I've been a fan of that forever. I think that's a really important thing. It does a lot for everybody. I mean, when you see the big guy walking around and decides to, talk to, one of the minions, I mean, it's a big deal. And it's good for everybody. So I think as long as they're sincere in that, and it's not, they're not doing it just to, try to appear that they're interested, but really sincerely be interested. Because I think there's a lot of opinions up and down the chain. So, there's, I don't know if I've got too many examples of that. I mean, I've seen organizations clearly where I worked before where, there was a group that seemed to do nothing but they were really limited in their thinking because it was always the same set of people, and not that they were bad people, they were good, they were fine, they were smart people, but they never really got out of this little circle, and after a while it was just the same thing, just being kind of regurgitated, So I think it's good to get some fresh eyes or fresh blood every once in a while, just to make sure that you're not falling prey to that type of thing.
Yeah, that groupthink mentality, it affects everybody, and whether you're in your own work group or whether you're in the management and leadership group, right? So absolutely. One thing that struck me when you were saying that, when you get out and you talk to people and you actually show that you're being genuine about it. I think that maybe another marker for a leader that's questioning whether they're a good engaged leader is how those people respond to the first time you get out there. If you do it, if they sort of recoil or they look at you like,
oh no.
what are you doing? That might be a clue you're not an engaged leader, right?
Yeah, I start crying. Yeah.
And that's the thing too. It's when I have an opportunity to go in and do any strategic consulting with a firm or a company, I always look at how engaged that person is. That the top management, the top brass with their folks, and you can pick it up real quickly as to how they treat people, and do they say please and thank you, and do they pay attention to the little things that get done, and the components that I always try and reassert every time I have one of those opportunities is that everybody within that company is important. They make that world go around, and from the lowest end of the spectrum to the highest end. And if you happen to be in the good fortune of being at the highest end, you've got to be the best cheerleader. You've got to be the best motivational person. You've got to be the one that gets out and embraces that role, not just with the customer, not just with the prospects, and not with your vendor stakeholders. It has to start from within.
Yeah, I agree, and I think if again back to this question and then this whole topic, how do you get to really know people? How do they get to know you? How do you get to them inside? Because clearly money's a motivator, sure. Everybody needs that to pay their bills. But it's the intrinsic things, the things that they can really latch onto, that they believe in. And if they can believe in someone or an idea, they will move mountains.
Absolutely.
So it's when I think people are good at reading that for the most part. So I think when they see that, they believe it. One of the things I think that I'm just going to veer off just a hair here, but the Steve Jobs biography came out a few years ago, and a lot of people read that. It was an interesting book, and clearly the guy was interesting, and he had a mind quite different from most. And I think on one hand he was brilliant, but on the other hand, I think after that book came out, it gave some people a license to be a jerk because of the way he was.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily think that's the right way to run things. To each his own. But that wouldn't necessarily be the way I would approach some of what he did. But I think you just got to be careful sometimes in some of those influences. There's certainly some great qualities that he had, some that I really admire, and then there's some that I don't.
Yep.
So.
No, that's a great example, and it's certainly not a manual as to how to grow a company in today's world. It might have worked back then, and certainly he's a different mind, and he was a different type of executioner in terms of business process and vision. Clearly, the guy was a genius.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhat inept when it came to the people components of that. I know someone that actually worked with him and talked about some of the interactions, and it was just very hot and cold at times, but they understood it because they were inside the company, could see the genius of what went on in that mind, and it was, unfortunately, not everybody gets that opportunity, but it's. I think towards the end of his life, I think he started to regret that, some of those decisions that he made, some of the ways that he treated some people, and maybe he made amends before the end, hopefully, but. For the folks that would watch this particular video today, there's no time like the present. If you haven't been an engaged leader, clearly it's time that you, sort of pull your head out of your proverbial backside and maybe start to do things a little bit differently. And if you are an engaged leader, don't stop, right? Continue to focus on doing those little things to stay in front of the people that are important to you, because your success is dependent on those folks day in and day out, and they need an attaboy, an attagirl, and a thank you, and just a sign of appreciation from time to time that their contribution does not go unnoticed, especially by those people at the top.
Right.
So Roy, how does everyone find you? If people wanted to reach out to you to learn, because I know you're doing I know you're doing the M&A. You're working with that company out of Dallas, but you're still doing some additional project work, and you've done some consulting, and you've got some great content out on the web. So how would people find you today if they wanted to learn more and maybe get in contact with you?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, there's a few ways. One is I've got a website that's titled The Project Management CEO, projectmanagementceo.com. And it's focused on the project management. There's actually the latest blog post actually goes into a little bit on M&A, on mergers and acquisitions, just a primer. But there are blog posts about, I guess, what I've experienced in the project management world, and some of what I believe there. Of course, LinkedIn, Roy Gatling. On Twitter, I think it's R Gatling. And
Google
so
you're on Google Plus, I know
I
that.
am. I'm on Google Plus. Yeah. So there you go.
You're famous.
Yeah. I love to hear from folks and engage with them. I've actually, from a couple of other interviews, I've gotten emails and some calls and things, and it's always nice to hear from folks. So.
Yep. Well, I got to tell you, I am absolutely honored that you continue to want to do a few of these interviews with me, and
hey, I heart you, man.
We're really not sure what they'll end up becoming, but the reality is I got a lot of great reaction from the first video. So if you're watching this video for the first time, please definitely go look for the other video I did with Roy. Got great feedback. People really liked it, but I'm honored that you'll share a few nuggets of your wisdom, because you are the man as far as I'm concerned, and I'm grateful for our friendship, but also that you give me day to day. So.
Well, you know how I feel about you. I love you, man.
I love you too, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing
All right, well, and we said one of these times we'll have to do this over the virtual beer, so we'll have to do that maybe the third or fourth interview in.
Sure. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up with that, and I appreciate your time today for sure, Roy. And I want to thank anybody that has watched this video, maybe who has been viewing it live, which it's kind of spooky to think that we might have been talking to somebody out there that we don't see, but. We definitely appreciate it. If you like what you heard, let us know and put some comments in the video comment section, and let us know if there are topics that you'd like to hear from Roy and myself that might interest you, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a wannabe entrepreneur. We definitely have a lot that we could certainly share and give to you, and we definitely appreciate the time for sure. And until next time, ripple on.